Masechet Baba Batra, Daf Ayin He. We continue with Agadah, and the major themes are going to be reward for the righteous and the beauty and size of Yerushalayim in the future. Ki ata Rav Dimi amar Rabbi Yonatan, Atid Gabriel la'asot, כנגיעה עם לוויתן, שנאמר, התמשוך לוויתן בחכה ובחבל תשקיע לשונו. ואלמלא הקדוש ברוך הוא עוזרו, אין יכול לו, שנאמר, העושו יגש חרבו. Rav Dimi says in the name of Rabbi Yonatan that in the future, Gabriel is going to make a hunt for the Leviathan, as the Pasuk says in Iyov. Hashem tells Eov, can you draw out Leviathan with a fishhook or press down his tongue with a cord? This is after Eov is challenging Hashem, and Hashem says, you don't know what you're talking about. You can't do anything. Only I can. Only Hashem can do such a thing. So that means that Eov cannot catch Leviathan, but Leviathan will be caught. There will be a hunt for it. And Gabriel is going to be in charge of it. But even Gabriel, the angel, won't be able to catch the great Leviathan by himself. Kadosh Baruch Hu will have to help him. As it says in another pasuk in Iyov, only he who made him can use his sword to approach him. It is talking about the behemoth, the great beast, but the Gemara is applying this also to Leviathan. כי אתה רב דימי אמר רבי יוחנן, בשעה שלוויתן רעב, מוציא הבל מפיו ומרתיח כל ממות שבמסולה, שנאמר, ירתיח כסיר מסולה. Rav Dimi says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, when Leviathan is hungry, then it produces breath from its mouth, and it's so hot, because it's so big and scary, and maybe like a kind of fire breath, that it boils all the waters of the deep. It opens its mouth because it's hungry, and that causes all the heat to come out and boil the water, as the pasuk says. He makes the deep boil like a pot. ואלמלא מכניס ראשו לגן עדן, אין כל ברייה יכולה לעמוד בריחו, שנאמר, ים ישים כמרח ככה. But this breath, this very hot breath, is also bad breath, and if not that Leviathan sticks its head into Gan Eden, no creature would be able to withstand its bad smell. As the pasuk, same pasuk in Iyov says, he makes the sea like a seething mixture. Merkacha is the same word as something as a perfume, something that smells nice. And so that smell from Gan Eden, when he puts his head in, helps to abate his bad breath. ובשעה שסמה, עושה תלמים בהם שנאמר אחריו יאיר נתיב. And when the Leviathan is thirsty and drinks, it drinks so much that it makes furrows in the sea. There's actual long tubes of empty space, because he drinks all that water. As the pasuk says, he makes a path to shine after him. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, en tehom chozer le'etano ad 70 shana, shneimar, yachshov tehom leseba, ve'en seba pechuta mi-70. This furrow that Leviathan makes when he drinks from the water is so big that the deep waters do not return to their place that they were before until 70 years pass. 70 years for the water to go back to the way it was. As the pasuk says in Iyov, one would think the deep to be old, and seba, old, means 70 years. In other words, each furrow lasts for 70 years. It's 70 years old. And then, only then, it gets back to its original place. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lasot seuda l'sadikim mebesaro shel Leviathan, shneimar yichru alav habarim, ve'en kera ela seuda, shneimar, ויכרה להם קרע גדולה ויאכלו וישתו ואין חברים אלא תלמידי חכמים, שנאמר היושבת בגנים חברים מקשיבים לקולך השמיעיני. Rabbi Yochanan says, in the future Hashem will make a feast for the righteous from the flesh of the Leviathan. As the pasuk says, chabarim, that often means some kind of magicians or a priest from some other nations. Yichru will make a feast. So kera means to make a feast, as another pasuk says that he prepared a great feast and they ate and drank. So that's the yichru, is feast, and chabarim refers here not to some ancient Zoroastrian magicians or priests, but rather to the sages, as the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, those you that dwell in the gardens, the companions. So we're reading chabarim instead as chaverim. It's the same letters, just different vocalization. And the chaverim refers to Talmidei Chachamim, who are colleagues and help each other and argue with each other, and they do so l'shem shamayim, to get closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, understand His Torah better, and help each other out. And so that's true friendship, and that's the chabarim is really chaverim. They're the ones that are going to make a seudah and enjoy from the flesh of Livyatan. The leftovers, how much can they eat? The leftovers are going to be divided and sold in the marketplaces of Yerushalayim, and that will bring lots of good income into the city. Shneimar yechaisuhu ben kenaanim ela tagarim. As the pasuk says, they will split it up among the Kenaanim. Kenaanim refers to the merchants. Shneimar kenan beyadom ozne birma la'ashok aheb. Not always honest merchants, as the pasuk in Hosea says. As for the merchants, the balances of deceit are in his hand. He loves to oppress. La'ashok aheb. And they do that by wrongful balances. Or another pasuk from Yeshaya, whose merchants are princes, whose traffickers are the honorable of the earth. And so that's what they'll do with the leftovers of the flesh of Livyatan. V'amar Rabba amar Rabbi Yochanan, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu lasot sukkah l'sadikim me'oro shel Livyatan shenemar, hatemale besukot oro zacha, osin lo sukkah lo zacha, osin lo silsal shene'emar, ub'silsal dagim rosho. It seems that all of these agadot, many of them are from Rabbi Yochanan. You have to remember that the Jews are living under the Romans and are a minority and are downtrodden or looked down upon, and for the Rabbi Yochanan is providing them with some hope to say, listen, this is only a temporary situation, that the Romans are ascendant. Already Christianity is becoming ascendant and putting down the Jews, and so these agadot give hope to say, listen, right now it seems like things are topsy-turvy, but in the future you'll see the Jewish people will be honored, and specifically the leaders, the Talmidei Chachamim, will be honored above all. And so he continues and says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the future will make a sukkah, a hut, a protective hut for tzaddikim from the skin of Livyatan. As Pasuk says, can you fill his skin with barbed irons? A strong structure that's made out of this beautiful skin of the Livyatan. So if they merit, then they will have an entire hut made out of the skin. But if they do not merit, if they're not so great, just only second level greatness, then Hashem will only make a top covering, as the pasuk says, or his head with fish spears. So that's only, silsal is only something on top. That's the same pasuk. So it's not surrounding them all around. Zacha sin lo silsal, lo zacha sin lo anak shneimar v'anakim legargerotecha. And that's the second level. If they don't merit even the second level, meaning they're not so righteous, then they'll get the third level reward, which is a necklace prepared for them, as another pasuk in Mishleh says, and a necklace about your neck. Zacha sin lo anak, lo zacha sin lo kameh, shenemar v'tiksherenu lena'arotecha. And if they don't even merit for that third level, then they'll only get the fourth level, back to a pasuk in Iyov, as it says, or bind him for your maidens. And this would be anak, a amulet, is just a very small a necklace or bracelet, not like the big one here. So that's 4 levels of reward, depending on the 4 levels of righteousness. And the leftover of the skin, after making the huts or tops or the amulets, Hashem will spread it over the walls of Yerushalayim, and the glory, radiance of the skin will radiate from one end of the world to the other, as the pasuk says in Yeshaya, and nations shall walk in your light, and kings at the brightness of your rising. And so you can see that this is the skin here is a representative, is an allegorical understanding of the recognizing the great spiritual and moral heights an example of the Jewish people in the future that will bring moral and spiritual light to the whole world. V'samti kadkod shimshotayich, amar Rabbi Shemuel bar Nachmani, peligi tere malache b'dikiya Gavriel u'Michael, v'amri la, tere amora'e b'marava, u'man inun, Yehuda v'Chizkiya b'nei Rabbi Chiya. So the pasuk in Yeshaya says, I will make your pinnacle of kadkod. We'll see what that word means. It's talking about the glory of Yerushalayim, that will have these pinnacles, these decorations on top. So what does this mean, this kadkod? There's two opinions. There's a machloket about it. And there's a machloket among the angels up in heaven, and they are Gabriel and Michael. But some say it's actually a machloket between Amoraim. This is really a nice Gemara, that you have a machloket between either angels or sages in the Talmudic times. And who are they? Yehuda and Chizkiya, the sons of Rabbi Chiya. Okay, so either one of these pair of great minds says, Chad amar shoham v'chad amar yashefeh amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leheveh keden ucheden. One opinion says that these pinnacles should be made out of onyx, and the other one said out of jasper. Here is onyx, and here is jasper, both beautiful, precious stones. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, well, you know what? You're both right. Let's put them all together, and we'll make a combination design. And so he said, keden ukeden, and that's the meaning of kad kod, is short for keden and kaden. Hashem says, I'm going to make it so beautiful, I'm going to follow both opinions of both of these angels, or of both of these sages. Back to Yeshaya says, the gates will be made out of precious stones. Ki hadiyatve, diyatib Rabbi Yochanan v'kadarish. Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu להביע בנים טובות ומרגליות שהם 30 על 30 וחוקק בהן 10 על 20 ומעמידן בשערי ירושלים. As Rabbi Yochanan was sitting and he was explaining this pasuk, and he said that in the future HaKadosh Baruch Hu will bring precious stones that are gigantic. They are 30 by 30 amot. That's like, 45 by 45 feet, cubes of precious stones, like this. And he's going to cut a hole in them that's 10 wide by 20 high. In other words, that will, right now we're understanding that will be the gates. That you'll walk through a giant precious stone to get into the Yerushalayim. Those that's what the gates will be made out of. Ligleg alav oto tamid hashta kebe'ata desisla la mashkechinan kulahai mashkechinan. So as Rabbi Yochanan was giving this lecture and explaining this pasuk and saying this, there was a student there who made fun of it, made fun of him, and said, we can't even find a precious stone that's the size of an egg of a dove, a small egg. That would be, imagine you find a precious stone, a diamond that's the size of a small egg. That would be huge. We can't even find that. And now you're going to find something that's 45 feet high and wide. That's ridiculous. And so this student is making fun of Rabbi Yochanan's teaching. לימים הפליגה ספינתו בים, חזה מלאכי השרת יתווה וקם מן הסרה, אבנים טובות מרגליות שהן 30 על 30 וחקוק בהן 10 ברום 20. אמר להו הנה למען. After some time, that very student who made fun of Rabbi Yochanan, he went out to sea on a ship, and he saw out there some angels that were sitting and sawing precious stones and pearls, and these blocks of precious stones were 30 by 30 amot, and they were cutting them out and hollowing them out a hole of 10 by 20. And he asked the angels, what are you doing? Who are these for? The angel said, we're preparing these because Hashem is going to put them in the gates of Yerushalayim. So then the student came back, and now he wasn't making fun anymore. He went to Rabbi Yochanan and said, you should continue teaching my master, because it's fitting for you to interpret, because just Lord, exactly what you said, I saw. Now I see that it's really true. Amar lo reka ilmale lo ra'ita lo hemanta melagleg al divrei chamimata natan enabo v'na'asa gal shel asamot. And Rabbi Yochanan did not appreciate this comment, this compliment. He said, you worthless person, if not that you saw it with your own eyes, you wouldn't have believed it. And you were mocking the statement of the sages. And so Rabbi Yochanan gave him the laser eyes, and this student turned into a pile of bones. That's not sufficient. That now he realizes that the sage was right because he saw it himself. He should have believed to begin with. We have a challenge against this teaching of Rabbi Yochanan, that the entrance, the gates of Yerushalayim are going to be made out of precious stone. The stones were 30 amot high, but they're going to make a cutout that's 20 amot high. That's not high enough, because the pasuk says in Vayikra, I will make you go upright. And Bimeir says, what does it mean that we're going to go upright? What's the big deal? We walk upright right now. It means that in the future, the Jewish people will be so tall, they'll be 200 amot tall, like twice that of Adam Rishon. Adam Rishon was only 100 amot tall. It says they're going to be double, double that, like 2 komot. Komimiyut is a doubled word. 2 heights of Adam Rishon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, me'ama keneged echal uchtalav shneimar, asher banenu kintaim megudalim ben orehem benotenu kezaviyot mechutabot ketavnit echal. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says, no, don't go so far, not 200. Rather, in the future, the Jewish people will be just 100 amot, which is as tall as the sanctuary and its walls, as the pasuk says in Tehillim, we whose sons are as plants grown up in our youth, whose sons are as corner pillars carved after the fashion of the sanctuary. In other words, their sons are going to be as tall as the sanctuary, and that's 100 amot. Okay, even 100 amot, which is half of Rabbi Meir's 200 amot, still is too tall and won't be able to fit into these gates that are only 20 amot high. They might be made out of precious stone and be very beautiful, but still they're going to be too short. Oh, Rabbi Yochanan, did you think that he was talking about the gates themselves are made out of precious stone and 20 amot high? No, this is only the windows that are high above, a transom above the gate. The gate is going to be 100 or 200 or more amot high, and then above that there will be these transom windows that will be made out of that precious stone. And so you see, it's going to be even greater, even more beautiful. ואמר רבה, אמר רבי יוחנן, עתיד הקדוש ברוך הוא לעשות שבע חופות לכל צדיק וצדיק שנאמר, וברא השם על כל מכון הר ציון, ועל מקרה ענן יומם ועשן ונוגה אש להבא לילה, כי על כל כבוד חופה. מלמד שכל אחד ואחד עושה לו הקדוש ברוך הוא חופה לפי כבודו. Rabbah says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan again, that in the future Hashem is going to make 7 canopies for every single righteous person to show how glorious and honored they are. As the pasuk says in Yeshaya, Hashem will create over the whole habitation of Mount Zion those who are invited into it. We'll discuss this in a second. Those who are invited. Mikra'eha, and is going to make for them. Okay, this we have to count as 7 items. It's not so clear how to count 7 because there's more than 7 words. You have to group some of them together. So it'll be a cloud and a smoke by day, shining flame of fire by night. For over all the glory shall be a canopy. Somehow there's different ways to count 7 in there. And this teaches that Hashem will make for each and every person a canopy according to his honor. Ashan bechupa lama. Now it says here that's going to be Ashan v'noga esh. Now there's Ashan. Why would you want to have smoke in your canopy? This sounds like it's not a good thing. Amar Rabbi Chanina shekol mi she'anav sarot b'talmidei chachamim ba'olam hazeh mitmaleot einav ashan le'olam haba. So, in fact, that would be a punishment for anyone who his eyes are narrow, literally. It means who's stingy. Against Torah scholars, in this world, his eyes will be filled with smoke because he used his eyes to look down upon sages. In this world, his eyes will be filled with smoke in the next world. Now also says that there's fire. Why would you want to have fire in your tent? The fire is not literal fire, but rather is referring to embarrassment. Each person will be burning in a shame from the size of the canopy of the other. If this person has a canopy that's small, he's going to look at the other guy who has a bigger canopy. Again, all this figurative for meaning the reward for one's merit of one's good deeds and righteousness in this world, and so the people who have less, who did less, are going to be ashamed that they did so little, because they're going to see how much their colleagues have accomplished. A similar way, you can understand the pasuk in Bemidbar. You shall put of your honor upon him. Hashem tells Moshe to put some of his honor upon Yoshua. Not all of Moshe's honor, but only some of it. The elders in that generation said that the face of Moshe was like the shining of the sun, whereas the face of Yoshua was only like the shining of the moon. Woe to that embarrassment, woe to that disgrace, that the second generation did not merit to have a leader as great as Moshe. Yoshua was also great, but only as great as the moon is compared to the sun. Amar Rabbi Chama bar Chanina, Eiser chupot asa kadosh baruch hu le'adam rishon began Eden, shene'emar began Eden Elohim ayita kol eben yekara vegomer. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina says that Hashem made 10 canopies for first Adam in Gan Eden. As a pasuk, this is a pasuk from Yechezkel 28, which is addressed to the king of Tyre, of Sor. Now that would be Hiram, during the time of King Shlomo, was the king of Tyre. This may be a more subtle reference to King Shlomo himself, but that's a matter for studying of Yechezkel. Anyway, Hashem tells this king of Tyre, you were so great, I gave you everything, I gave you riches and I gave you wisdom, and then what did you do? You took it, went to your head, you became haughty, and you went off the path. If we look at these Pesukim inside, we can see that Hashem is telling Yechezkel, go and make a lament over the king of Sor, and tell him, you were the seal of perfection, you were full of wisdom and flawless in beauty. And so now it's describing this king and comparing him to Adam Harishon in Gan Eden. You Eden Gan Elohim Hayita. You had everything going for you. It's as if you were in Eden, the garden of Hashem, and you had everything. Kol eben yekara mesuchatecha. Every precious jewel was your covering. This is what we're analyzing right now, that the coverings of Adam Harishon in Gan Eden were made out of 10 different types of precious jewels. And then it goes on and lists them. Odem piteda v'yahalom, tashish shoham v'yashefeh, sapir nofech ubarkat, v'zahav. Notice that zahav is the last one. And then the pasuk goes on, and we'll explain these phrases also. Melechet tupecha un kabecha bach beyom hibara'acha konanu. Mind for you prepared the day you were created. So something about nikabecha here is translated as mind. Drums and something about drums and mind when you were created. The Gemara will discuss all of these details as well. Okay, so it's back to the point. There were 10 canopies made for Adam Harishon, as it says that your coverings were. Then it lists all these 10 different precious jewels. So that means 10 canopies. Mor Zutra Amar Achatesre Kol Eben Yekara. Mor Zutra says no, not 10 but 11, because it also says every precious jewel. That comes to add another one. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Vegarua shebekulan zahav dekach hashib leil basof. The cheapest of all of them was gold. Imagine that. Gold was the cheapest of all of these 10 or 11 precious jewels. Mai melechet tupecha unkabecha bach. Now what does it mean? The workmanship of your drums and your holes. Drums in the sense of like a drum has a big cavity inside it. So what are these holes that the pasuk is referring to? Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leChiram melech Sor, bechal nistakaltu barati nekabim ba'adam. Hashem told Hiram, the king of Tyre, when I saw you, I decided to make all kinds of holes and orifices in human beings, so that they would never think that they are so great, that they're some kind of angelic or divine being, if they suddenly decide to become haughty and prideful. Just look at your bodies, that the way we need to eat and excrete, and we also have an animalistic side to us. V'ika de'amar de'hachi kamar becha nistakalti ve'kanasti mita al adam Adam Harishon. Or another interpretation, I looked at you and I decided to decree death upon Adam Harishon, again, to show he's only human, he's not a god, and we are lowly beings. And so it's important for human beings to also have these lowly reminders and ultimately to die. Mai ve'al mikra'eha. Now back to the pasuk we mentioned before. Hashem will create over the whole habitation of Mount Zion, and over those who are invited to Yerushalayim, a cloud and smoke by day. What does it mean? What does it mean, those who are invited? Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Lo ki Yerushalayim shalom hazeh, Yerushalayim shalom haba. Yerushalayim shalom hazeh, kol haroseh la'alot oleh, shalom haba, en olin ela mizumanin la. And so Rabbi Yochanan explains, Jerusalem nowadays is not like Jerusalem of the future. Nowadays, anyone who wants to go up to Jerusalem can go. You just go there. But in the future, only though it's going to be special, only those who are invited to will be able to ascend up to the city of Jerusalem. V'amar Rabba amar Rabbi Yochanan, atitin tzadikim shenikra'in al shemo shel HaKadosh Baruch shenemar, kol nikra b'shmi v'lichbodi berativ, yesartiv, af asitiv. Rabbi Yochanan says in the future, the tzadikim will be called upon Hashem's name, meaning people will see a tzaddik. This is, oh, there, see, that's a representative of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the pasuk says, kol nikra b'shmi, everyone that's called by my name, right? This is a tzaddik of Hashem. Who will be called by Hashem's name, associated with God's own glory and greatness? Those who are created for my honor, that I created and I made them. V'amar Rabbi Shemuel bar Nachmani amar Rabbi Yochanan, shelosha nikru al shemo shel Kadosh Baruch Hu ve'Elohen tzadikim u'mashiach v'Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yochanan adds that in fact there are three different things that are called by Hashem's name, and that's tzadikim, the Mashiach, and Yerushalayim. Tzadikim hadamaran. We already quoted a pasuk regarding the tzadikim. Mashiach dichtiv v'zeh shemo asher yikreo Hashem sidkenu, and this is his name, talking about the Mashiach, that he will be called Hashem is our righteous one. Those people will look at Mashiach and say that's the righteous of Hashem. Yerushalayim dichtiv sabib shemona asar alef Hashem ha'ir miyom Hashem shama. And describing the city of Yerushalayim, Yechezkel says it will be 18,000 reeds about, and the name of the city that day shall be Hashem is there. Shama. Al tikreh Shama ela Shema. No, don't read Hashem is there, but rather Hashem is its name. So this will be a city of God. The name of the city will be God, because when you go there, you'll sense and understand the holiness of the place. Amar Rabbi Elazar, Atidin Sadikin she'omerim lifnehen kadosh, derech she'omerim lifnei kadosh baruch shenemar, vayanish b'Sion al Tav Yerushalayim kadosh yamer shemo. Rabbi Elazar says in the future, the Sadikim will have the angels say kadosh before them, just like the angels say kadosh kadosh in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They will also praise the Sadikim themselves with that same praise of holiness, as the pasuk says in Yeshaya. It shall come to pass that he who is left in Sion and he who remains in Yerushalayim shall be called holy. And so that's a connection. Just when one represents Hashem's holiness in this world, then they can merit to also be praised as holy by the angels. Amar Rabba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu le'agviyat Yerushalayim shalosh parsaot lema'ala. Rabbi Yochanan says in the future, Yerushalayim, right now it's on a hill, but it'll be even higher. It'll be lifted upwards 3 parsaot. That's like 6 miles high. Shenema v'dama v'yasheba tachteha. My tachteha ke tachteha. As pasuk says in Zechariah, it shall be lifted up and inhabited in its place. What do you mean in its place? That as big as its place down below is, meaning its width, its area, that's how high it will be. And how do you know that the area of Yerushalayim is going to be 3 parsangs? Amar Rabba, Amar Yahusa Balididi Chazirusham Kamaita Utlata Parseh Havya. And an elder said, I saw the original place of Yerushalayim before it was destroyed, and it was 3 square parsangs, so that's how big it was. So now in the future, it's going to be that tall. Now you're going to say, well, maybe that's not such a great thing. Imagine every time you want to go, you have to walk up how many steps? Miles and miles of steps? That's going to be a pain. Talmud Omar, mi elecha teufena v'chayonim el arubotehem. That's what Pasuk says in Yeshaya. Who are these that fly as clouds and as doves to their coats? The people that want to go up to Yerushalayim, they'll be able to fly easily right up there like clouds and like doves. There's a reference to elevators or escalators that will take the people up easily. Amara Papa Shema Amina, Hay Aiba Telata Parse Midle. Now Papa says you can learn from here that a cloud is 3 parsangs high, since it's comparing the height of Yerushalayim to the height of a cloud, so that's how high clouds are. We see the bottom of them, but if you go up, you can see they're actually very tall. Amar Rabbi Yochanan bar Papa, bikesh HaKadosh Baruch Hu latet Yerushalayim b'midah, shene'emar va'omad ana ata holech v'yomer elai lamod et Yerushalayim l'rot kama rochbaha ve'kama orka. Rabbi Chanina bar Papa said, originally Hashem wanted to give a fixed measurement for Yerushalayim. As it says in Zechariah, Zechariah says, I lifted my eyes and saw a man with a measuring line, a plumb line, a string with a weight on the bottom that builders would use to make walls straight. And I said, where are you going? And he said, to measure Yerushalayim, to see what is its breadth and what is its length. So he wants to make Yerushalayim, he's going to make it very big. So isn't that good? Amru malachei hasharet v'nei HaKadosh Baruch Hu ribono shel olam harbe kedachim barata ba'olamcha shelamot ha'olam ולא נתת מידת אורכן ומידת רוחבן. ירושלים ששמך בתוכה ומתעשך בתוכה, צדיקים בתוכה, אתה נותן בה מידה. But the angels complained and they said, ריבונו של עולם, you made a lot of big cities in the world of foreign nations, and you did not make a fixed measure of their length and of their width, but meaning that they grow and grow. You go to ancient Rome, these huge cities with hundreds of thousands, even millions of people in them. So Yerushalayim, that your name is called in it, and your Bet HaMikdash and Tzaddikim are living there. You're going to give a fixed value? That's actually limiting it. Even if you put a big value, still you should leave it open-ended so it can always grow. Miyad vayomer elav rus taber el hanar halaz lemor perazot shebirushalayim merob adam ubehema betocha. And so Hashem said, you're right. And so Pasuk continues in Yeshaya and says, behold, that angel that spoke with me went forth. Another angel went out to meet him, and he said, run, speak to this young man, saying, Yerushalayim shall be inhabited without walls, for the multitude of men and cattle within it. Yerushalayim will not be able to contain all those people within a wall, and so it's going to be unwalled and grow and grow. If you look at Yerushalayim today, you see suburbs upon suburbs. There's no wall that can contain it. Yerushalayim keeps on growing. So this nevuah is being fulfilled. Amar Resh Lakish, Atid HaKadosh Baruch Hu leosif al Yerushalayim 1,000 tefav ginaof, 1,000 kefel migdalim, 1,000 lisoy biraniyot, 1,000 ushne shilot tot peraot, v'chol achat v'achat havya kesipori beshalvata. Rabbi Resh Lakish says in the future Hashem will add to Yerushalayim 1,000 times the gematria of tefaf. That many gardens, and 1,000 times the gematria of kefel, of towers, and 1,000 times the gematria of lisoy will be fortifications, and 1,000 times of shiloh will be these small houses. And each and every one of those additions is going to be like the size of Sipori in its prosperity. Sipori, one of the biggest Jewish cities in the Galilee, and all that greatness will go down to Yerushalayim. The meaning I said is as gematria. That's one interpretation, and so that would be 169,000 gardens and 210,000 fortresses, and so on. There's some other interpretations of those words as well. Tanya. אמר רבי יוסי, אני ראיתי סיפורי בשלוותה, והיו בה 180,000 שווקים של מוכרי סיכה כדרה. More on Sipori, Braita says that according to Rabbi Yosef, I saw Sipori when it was in its prosperity, and there were 180,000 market sellers of meat sauces. Imagine, just meat sauces, 180,000 of them. So imagine how many the sellers of everything else and how big that and great that city was. You can use that to estimate how many thousands of times greater Yerushalayim will be. Yechezkel, when he's describing the future Jerusalem, says the side chambers were one over another 3 and 30 times. Mai shalosh shoshim pamim. What does that mean, 3 and 30 times? Is it 3 or is it 30? Amar Rabbi Levi, Amar Rav Papi, Mishum Rabbi Yoshua Disichni, Im shalosh Yerushalayim hen, kol achat ve'achat yesh ba sheloshim medorin lema'ala. Im sheloshim Yerushalayim hen, kol achat ve'achat yesh ba shelosha medorin lema'ala. And so Rabbi Levi explains that it's going to be 3 times in one direction and 30 times in another direction. If Yerushalayim in the future is going to be 3 times wide as it is, or as it was in its glory, then each house is going to have 30 stories, one on top of another. In ancient times, if you had a 2-story or 3-story house, that was really tall. But they couldn't imagine a 30-story building nowadays. It's a tall building, but it's not even so tall. But the point is that it's going to be wider, 3 times wider than it is, and it's going to be 30 times higher. Or the other way around. If it's going to be 30 times wider than it is now, then it's also going to be 3 times higher. Every building, every house will have 3 stories above, so that it will contain all of the great populace that will live there, and that just is an example of the great glory and honor that the future city of Yerushalayim will display. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.